Welcome everyone. My name is Lizzie Moon and I will be your Zoom program host this evening. I am a supporting member of Old Pueblo Archaeology Center and a member of the Archaeology Opportunities Support Organization. And I have a deep interest in the topic of our presentation tonight, so I'm excited to hear what our speaker has to say. And during tonight's Zoom session, if you have a question or a comment, we ask that you please click on your Zoom Q&A for the questions, or your chat button for comments, maybe even letting us know where you're from, and that you type all of that there. And then later on, I will see all the typed entries, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll relay as many of the questions and comments as possible to our speaker in the time we have allotted. So before we begin our presentation this evening, I'd like to introduce Old Pueblo Archaeology Center's Executive Director, Alan Dart, who will read Old Pueblo's land acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Old Pueblo Archaeology Center respectfully acknowledges that our nonprofit organization occupies and conducts our activities on land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, Old Pueblo strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service.
Thank you, Al. And this organization is bringing their third Thursday Food for Thought presentation. And so for tonight's third Thursday program, Old Pueblo is delighted to welcome our guest presenter, Greg Munson. Mr. Munson is the founder of the Society for Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest and the director of its Cultural Landscapes Survey program. Greg came to the Southwest in 1991 as a ranger at Mesa Verde National Park, where he cultivated his interest in cultural astronomy while giving tours to thousands of visitors each year. He studied the documentation of ancestral Pueblo architecture and worked with the park's archaeological site conservation program, documenting Cliff Palace, Spruce Tree House, and other backcountry sites. Greg now works as a consultant with a focus on continuing his interest in architecture and astronomy. He brought the skills learned at Mesa Verde when he established the Society for Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest. Now he's working to bring standardized documentation and visualization practices to cultural astronomy research, landscape archaeology. In his presentation this evening, Greg will discuss new ways to record, document, and visualize the cultural landscape of the greater American Southwest using the Society's Cultural Landscapes Survey program, which has tribal consultation as a key component. So please welcome this month's third Thursday Food for Thought guest speaker, Greg Munson.
Thank you, Lizzie. I greatly appreciate the introduction, and I'm happy to be here tonight with all of you. The Society gratefully acknowledges Rick Alling, Chris Dombrowski, Ray Williamson, Mary Wiaki, Bertram Savadawa, and now Philip Tuluestua for their help in putting together this program. Our Cultural Resources Landscape Survey program, and this program tonight. The Society was founded in 2011 and supported research in cultural astronomy by holding regional conferences and workshops. One thing that became apparent during these conferences and workshops is that there were questions by the indigenous peoples about the placement of buildings and orientation of these buildings on the landscape. In March of 1922, I was attending a volunteer training at Kennedy Ancients National Monument Visitor Center Museum and Escalante Pueblo up on top of the hill nearby. And that's when I first observed this wall alignment of the south wall of Escalante Pueblo to what appeared to be the peak of Mount Hesperus. And this is what gave me the inspiration to begin the Cultural Landscape Survey program in our society. In order to understand what we're looking at, we first have to understand what a cultural landscape is. And cultural landscapes in the greater American Southwest are generally managed and owned by government agencies, such as the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, and other agencies. And the National Park Service has a well-defined definition of a cultural landscape as a geographic area, including both natural and cultural resources, and the wildlife or domestic animals therein, associated with a historic event, activity, or person, or existing or exhibiting other cultural or aesthetic values. And that really encompasses officially what a cultural landscape is by definition. But other groups, the Cultural Landscape Foundation, I think has a good definition of cultural landscape also, in that cultural landscapes provide a sense of place and identity. They map our relationship with the land over time, and they are part of our national heritage in each of our lives. So this is a more general view of a cultural landscape, but really brings in the human sense, that this relates to people and the land over time. For me, a cultural landscape is a single unified object, inseparable from its parts and the people that live there, past and present. So when we look at cultural landscapes, we really need to begin to understand that it transcends time. It involves both the people today and the people from the past. Our Cultural Landscape Survey program is based on the concept of expanding the idea of the site, archaeological site boundary. Traditionally, and especially in cultural resource management that involves development of infrastructure, all archaeological sites are mapped with a dotted line around them to show that this is the limits of the archaeological site. Well, in truth, that's not the limit of the site of where these people lived. What really encompasses the site is everything that they could see around them and above them. This involves agricultural and resource procurement areas nearby, relationships with other nearby villages, connections to horizon features, such as the interface where the land touches the sky. This is an important place because this is what the boundary between that which can be known and that which cannot be. The sky is something that is hard to understand sometimes. And so that place on the horizon where the two touch is very important. And also it relates to climate and astronomical connections to the day and night sky. Climate is very important, and the sky has a lot to do with climate, clouds, rain, wind. So the sky is more than just the stars, the night sky. It's the day sky, the sun and the moon, and things we see in and around it. And so what we're trying to do is create a survey program, a project that can document the landscape around an archaeological site as an integral part of that site. The most important first element of a research of a cultural astronomy or cultural landscape survey project is that we must do well-designed research and consultation, determine what are the questions. The other another aspect is site documentation, to bring standardized documentation, rigorous documentation, documentation that can be tested by others. And that is one of the things that in cultural astronomy has been a challenge, is to create a unified standardized documentation system for some of these elements. Quite often, anybody that studies cultural astronomy, archaeoastronomy, invents their own system of documentation. How do they record the site? So as a nonprofit organization, we are trying to bring those different methods together and create a standardized system. The third element is, how do we visualize the data? How do we see a cultural landscape on a screen in front of us on paper? So visualization of a cultural landscape and the documentation that we have done is very important too. The research designs we do is done through consultation and the development of our Cultural Landscapes Advisory Group. The principal portion of this advisory group is our Native American Advisory Council, and this consists of representatives and individuals from descendant tribal communities. This involves individuals that have an interest, but also the tribal historic preservation offices, reaching out to these people to bring them into how we do our research and how we disseminate the results, making sure that what we are saying is appropriate. We are partnering with other academic and research institutions. We are working with, have worked in the past with the University of New Mexico and have a good relationship with Arizona State University also, and also Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. We also have a great respect for the landowners, the managers, and the stakeholders of the lands that we study, whether they be federal or private. We bring cooperating and nonprofit organizations into our group. Right now, we're working with the Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance, the folks that are benefiting the Canyon Ancients National Monument, and also Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. We have done conferences with them out in the past and have published some of our volumes with them. So, but most importantly, probably is the avocation of professional archaeologists that are you the folks that are watching here today. It is you that goes out to these sites on a regular basis, and if we can establish an easy to use documentation system that can be done with instruments that you can bring with you, such as smartphones, then it is you that will be collecting the data and bringing it to us so that we'll have a better understanding of these cultural landscapes as we move forward. What are the basic questions that we are looking at with this program? Principally, we are trying to look at why are sites placed where they are on the landscape. Well, is it environmental? Is it topographic? Does it have something to do with the horizon? Does it have something to do with the sky? Why was it put where it was? Are these villages, towns, put together in a way that they have relationships with each other across vast distances or short distances? Most importantly, are these buildings that they put on the landscape oriented to the landscape features, elements of the sky, or astronomical cycles, such as the solar and lunar cycles, solstices, equinoxes, and the major lunar standstills? How are buildings designed to express their relationship with the land, sky, and each other? Were they put there in a way that expresses their link to the sky and the cosmology of the Puebloan people? These are the questions that we're trying to answer. Documentation practices are standard practices. First of all, we start with a review of our archival resources, the manuscript, photograph, and material collections of a site that we are studying. We also are working with the architectural documentation system that is focused on wall construction patterns and recording architectural features based on the Mesa Verde Architectural Documentation Program that in some small way I did help develop. But we're also trying to develop rigorous standardized protocols for documenting a cultural landscape. Orientation and viewshed of buildings and features is important to be added to CRM forms, cultural resource management forms. Developing calibrated horizon profile forms. And establishing procedures for photogrammetric and terrain modeling. We also are very focused on assisting descendant tribal communities, the members of the society, and trained volunteers in conducting field research and assisting them in the publication of their results through conferences, workshops, and written publications. Our field methodologies are also fairly standard archaeological practices. Measurements with tapes, compasses, theodolites, transits, developing the form packages for architectural and for rock art archaeological sites. I'm sorry, rock imagery sites. No. We're also developing procedures for photogrammetric modeling and visualization that can be executed in the field. One of the most important developments of our cultural landscape survey program is that of a calibrated horizon profile. This is a profile that actually records and documents the horizon, the interface between the sky and the land, in a 360-degree view around us. So we are capturing the azimuth and elevation of prominent horizon features. We're calculating the position of solar and lunar events, the rising and setting of the sun and the moon positions on the horizon. We are producing a horizon profile that displays this captured data. And we are constructing calibrated horizon profile silhouettes for use in astronomy software, such as Starry Night Pro and Stellarium. One of the first elements of creating a calibrated horizon profile is getting acquainted with the topography and the peaks and the horizon in a certain area. And a great website to do that with is called Hey, What's That? And the website is there at the bottom of the screen. This is the profile that I created by just going on their map and selecting Escalante Pueblo. And from this, we have the view of the eastern horizon, which shows Mount Hesperus, the profile of the altitude of the sight line between the two. And this can be clicked through all the way around the horizon. Each of the little red triangles is a peak, and you can click on those and it'll tell you the name of the peak. That really is crucial for calibrating our measurements and also for being able to record which peaks we're recording. Hey, What's That? Will also generate what's a viewshed profile. And here's the viewshed profile for Escalante Pueblo, and it's linked to Hesperus Mountain. And the kind of brown shaded areas are the areas that you can see from the top of Escalante Pueblo in a 360-degree view. Hesperus is located right here, and this is Elston Mountain, which will become important later on. Also on this profile, it lists all of the peaks, the azimuth to them, their distance, and the elevation of that peak. So this is all good data for us to have from one simple website. This is a website that you can use your location anywhere you go. It'll show you in the landscape around you, what peaks are around you, the names, all that kind of thing. So it's good for just traveling in general to get to know the landscape around you. Following getting to know the site, you have to go out to the site and take in the field transit work records and azimuth and elevations of horizon features and orientation of architectural features. This is where we take our maps and go out and take our measurements, use a transit to determine the orientation of the walls, what can be seen from various features, and the architecture itself. This is where the phase where we do the architectural documentation at the site, where we understand how the site was put together by looking at it in more detail. And we're going to delve into this a little bit more in a few minutes. The next thing for creating a calibrated horizon profile is to create a horizon panorama. And the horizon panorama is a series of photos taken with a digital camera on a leveled tripod. In the past, it was a little more difficult to do because you had to use specialized flat lenses to take the distortion out of the landscape. And you had to use fixed lenses that were specialized to do this to get the best possible results. Now in this new digital age, it's a little easier to do this with various different programs. Photoshop will stitch photos together, but there is one that we use. It's called Hugin. The website is on the bottom there again. Hugin is a program where you simply load a series of photographs into its processor, and it will then stitch them all together and takes out all of the digital distortion, all the lens distortion, and creates a profile that you can then calibrate when you put these profiles into the calibrated horizon profile form, and also into astronomy software, again, such as Starry Nights Pro or Stellarium. The end result is a cultural landscape survey program, calibrated horizon profile. And this is the form we created. And so each of the sites will get this form finished. It contains a lot of the information at the top, the header, the site name, the site number, the ownership of the site, where you were when you took the photographs and the measurements, who did that. But one of the more important things is that it records the magnetic declination at the site. And for that, we use the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration's Magnetic Declination app. You can load that up on your phone if you look at it, and I'll tell you the magnetic declination of anywhere at that time. And we record what kind of instrument was used. When we record all this information, we can make any calibrations and adjustments to the measurements needed. The form itself lists out each of the features that we measured, their azimuth, whether it's a true north, magnetic north, and the elevation in terms of the angle from level up or down to that peak or point on the horizon. One thing that we are adding to this form is the distance to that feature, as it makes a great deal of difference if the feature is at a great distance, over 7 kilometers, or nearby, under 7 kilometers. That makes a big difference in how the measurements are interpreted. Photogrammetric modeling is another process that we use, where we take about 100 to 150 photographs of any given site, covering the features in the building from various angles and extending out into the landscape. We use both terrestrial photography and aerial drone photography where permitted, with licensed drone pilots. We also use Agasop and Metashape to align the photographs into 3-dimensional models, and the models are quite useful for our own architectural analysis, but most importantly for cultural preservation activities. They record a site in detail in 3 dimensions at any given point in time. From these models, we were able to export digital elevation models and KMZ files for integration into various GIS software and spherical mapping applications such as Google Earth. And this adds data to those other platforms. Another thing we've been looking into using a lot more lately and are in development on is aerial LiDAR, various different GIS applications, and existing publicly available digital elevation models. The shaded models that show slope and aspect. This gives us good information on an environmental context when we're looking at an archaeological site. One we see here is Escalante Pueblo on top of the hill next to the Canyon Ancients Visitor Center Museum. We're also exploring the spatial relationships of sites to each other and prominent landscape features in the area. ArcGIS, QGIS, and Google Earth to be the platforms that we use to kind of bring some of this data together to visualize it so that we can begin to create a complete cultural landscape in a digital manner. One of the things that we have also been working very hard to do is to integrate this information into astronomy software such as Stellarium and Starry Nights Pro. This way, we are able to make observations when we're able to load accurate horizon profiles into these programs. We're able to make accurate observations anytime, 24/7, 365 days a year. And what this does, it helps reduce the site impacts and travel costs. And when you actually get it to work, it's very cool and you can learn a lot, as we're going to find out a little bit later. Our first cultural landscape survey project was Escalante Pueblo at Canyon Ancients National Monument and Museum. It's on the hill above it. It's located on a prominent knoll. Escalante Pueblo is located on probably the highest elevation great house in the Montezuma Valley area. And so it had a prominent view of the entire landscape around it. The Montezuma Valley, access to the Dolores River is also adjacent and between Escalante Pueblo and the Reservoir Group. Reservoir Group is another Chacoan style great house with a great kiva. Dates a little earlier than Escalante Pueblo and contemporaneous with it, and also features a tri-walled structure known as Emerson Pueblo. These two sites bracket the easy access from the Montezuma Valley to the Dolores River Valley. So this may have been an area where a lot of people transited. Escalante Pueblo was excavated in the a portion of Escalante Pueblo was excavated in the mid-1970s, and Alan Reed and David Bredernitz put out the report on the archaeological stabilization of Dominguez and Escalante Pueblos in 1979, and Ian Sandy Thompson published his report, The Escalante Community, in 1994 regarding these sites. Escalante Great House Pueblo is a Chacoan style great house. We think it qualifies as that because it has a lot of the characteristics as such. There's a kiva constructed partially above ground level. That kiva has floor vaults, a subfloor ventilator system. The site has Chacoan style masonry. And it appears from our analysis that this was a planned public architectural site. Escalante itself has two major occupation periods: the Great House period, which is around AD 1120 to 1150, and a Mesa Verde reoccupation from about 1180 to about 1220. This map of Escalante really shows how the site was put together. One of the key features that we look at first is wall construction patterns. How do the walls bond and abut to each other? What we see here in this site is that the kiva in the center of the site, everything else is accreted to it. Everything else is joined to it, abutted to it. So this kiva was built first. Then the other rooms were built around it. And there's two side rooms here that appear to have been long architectural spaces that were later subdivided. And on the bottom, after its initial construction, was another series of rooms placed onto it very soon after the site was initially built. When we looked at the site architecturally, we saw that the site had a slight southwest orientation, south-southwest orientation, but that the walls were placed at 90-degree angles, at least the south eastern corner, and that's where the excavation took place mostly, and that appears to have been placed very carefully and built very carefully in a symmetrical pattern with bilateral symmetry, which relates to what we believe as a seasonal social organization. And the southern room block built about 10 years afterwards, but it maintained that 90-degree angle and the orientations of the walls. Well, we also looked at our orientations of the walls themselves. The eastern wall of the Pueblo has a true azimuth of 4 degrees and 30 minutes to the north. And the south walls have a orientation of 94 degrees and 30 minutes. And these are measured with our theodolite, our transit. The southern orientation through the center of the kiva is to the south at 184 and 30. And this view is principally of the Mesa Verde escarpment to the south. The northern, the eastern wall has a view up to the north of Elston Mountain. This wall has, like I said, 4 degrees and 30 minutes. Elston Mountain is at 7 degrees and 40 minutes. A lot would say that's not accurate then. Well, it is accurate if one thinks in terms of indigenous thought patterns, and that is it culturally relevant. It doesn't have to be Western astronomy precise to be culturally relevant. And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at more too. Most importantly was the orientation of the southern wall, both southern walls, and they both have an orientation directly or within half a degree of arc of to Hesperus Mountain. Hesperus is at 95 degrees, true. The south walls are 94 degrees and 30 minutes. And half a degree of arc is really more than adequate for the studies that we do, because that's the minimum resolution of the human eye. Your human eye can only distinguish to about a half a degree of arc. So this really confirms that they were probably pointing those walls at the mountain carefully. To the west, these walls have a slightly further off, but still probably culturally relevant connection to the Bears Ears off to the west. Bears Ears National Monument now. The Bears Ears form the feature on an otherwise flat horizon, as does Elston Mountain, and then the prominent Mount Hesperus. But when we look at sites like this that have been excavated and stabilized, we have to understand what is the archaeological evidence for the configuration of the walls as we see them today. Were they reconstructed heavily? Were they changed? Were features added? Were features subtracted through the stabilization process? And we have to look for evidence of, were these rooms on the side ever really open as large rectangular rooms? First place we go for that is the Canadian Nations National Monument Archives, accession number 78.28. These are the field notes, photographs, and reports from the excavation of Dominguez and Escalante Pueblos. I want to thank Blythe Morrison and Daniel Long for helping me out getting into these records so we could have them for our analysis. One of the first things I wanted to look at is, are these side rooms, these long side rooms, were they ever used as one long architectural space and later subdivided? The report showed that the rooms, that walls between rooms 4, 5, and 6 were abutted on both ends, so they were placed into there after the outside walls were built, and they were listed as dry laid masonry in the site report. And this photograph shows that there was dry laid masonry with some a little bit of jinking and grouting to help it stand up. But the important part is that dry laid masonry is not a Chacoan style masonry. Dry laid masonry is more indicative of the Mesa Verde reoccupation phase later on. So it is quite probable that these rooms were long and were later subdivided. And that relates to the symmetry of the site, the bilateral symmetry, and possible looking at seasonal social organization. The other part that we wanted to look at carefully is the east wall of the Pueblo. And on the right here, you have the east exterior wall as it was being excavated. You can see that the wall was in fairly good shape, except for the top capstones. And that was maintained when they stabilized the wall. So we know that this eastern wall is likely to be in its original position, pointing where it originally did. Another view of the east wall after it was excavated and stabilized shows its current condition, and that is pretty good evidence that it was repaired correctly. And this is the orientation of the wall today. As you can see, the wall goes fairly close out to Elston Mountain and the valley next to it. This is Elston Mountain. And so this wall reaches out to the horizon to connect with Elston Mountain. The same analysis we did for the south wall, but unfortunately, a good portion of the rooms along the south wall, at least the southeast corner or southwest corner, were never fully excavated. Only about 35% of the site was excavated. So when we're looking at it, this is the excavation and stabilization photograph of the site. So the south wall appears again to be in fairly good condition and appears to have been stabilized and repaired correctly. The only thing that we did want to try and look at in the records was these two dividing walls. And those two dividing walls are similar to rooms 4, 5, and 6. But these were never excavated down any further than to determine the abutment pattern. And these were similarly abutted on either end. There is no information as to whether they were dry laid also. But it is a logical conclusion that these were also the same as room 4, 5, and 6, creating a long room that was later subdivided. Mount Escalante Pueblo is off to the peak of Mount Hesperus along this wall. So when we looked at it, that is a good indication. And we can also look at Google Earth to see the orientation of the walls. And this is what we found, and it's very close to the top of Mount Hesperus in the background. This data was then compiled into the calibrated horizon profile, demonstrating the connection between the south wall of Escalante Pueblo to Mount Hesperus. But what's important that we know is that Mount Hesperus is at 95 degrees. Probably everybody's thinking, well, equinox is at 90 degrees. And so it doesn't necessarily line up with equinox, but let's take a look at what equinox actually means. There's astronomical equinox is a Western concept. Western astronomical equinox is a day and a specific time that the sun crosses in between the seasons. Is it culturally relevant to have only that specific day and time marked? It's a Western concept. Equinox in Puebloan is an etern. It's the time of the middle sun, the time when the sun is halfway around on its journey between its time to the north and its time at the south. And the La Plata Mountains, Mount Hesperus, actually form a very good indicator of when the sun is at or near its time of the middle sun. The sun will rise above, right at the peak of Mount Hesperus, about 8 to 10 days on either side of Western equinox. But what this does, it forms a time where you can see the sun begin to enter the La Plata mountain range when it's traveling to the north. cross over the top of Mount Hesperus and then down on the other side. And when it returns, it'll hit the point of equinox and then travel up and over the mountains. So it's about the journey, not the destination. And in this, we look at what this does is it creates a calendar for the time of the middle sun, which is associated with the changing of seasonal changing of responsibilities for political and social organization in the pueblos. We see that in today's pueblos, is the middle sun, the time of equinox. It's about an 8 to 10 day period. It's different. And what that actually does is it puts there's two groups in some of the southeastern pueblos, the summer people and the winter people. It puts the summer people in charge roughly about 10 to 20 days longer than the winter people, which is actually fairly well documented. So this is a way of doing this. And it's also a way of marking the time of the middle sun that is not dependent upon weather. Most of the equinox markers you hear people talk about only works on a specific day and a specific time. Well, what if it's cloudy at that time? This marker, all you have to know is the sun on the north side or the south side of Mount Hesperus to know that you are in the right time to do the activities you need to do. We also learned something else by when Rick Alling from our group put the horizon profile panorama, stitched it together and wrote the code to load it into Starry Nights Pro. We learned something about the association of that south wall and Hesperus. What we learned was that the constellation we know as Orion rises directly above Mount Hesperus. The belt stars arise above Mount Hesperus every night or every day of the year. And so we see that really nice association with the belt stars rising above Mount Hesperus, and it creates an association. The most prominent time that you see this is probably at the time of the winter solstice sunset from Escalante Pueblo. At the time that the winter solstice sun is setting to the south west, Orion is rising above Little Platas and Mount Hesperus. Mount Hesperus is one of the sacred peaks. What we've learned from our work at Escalante Pueblo is that they have that was constructed at this location and oriented to the landscape for a specific purpose. We think that the Great House occupational phase exhibited geometrical and symmetrical architectural construction characteristics indicating planned public architecture and seasonal social organization. The landscape orientations tied the building into a sacred landscape and possibly a shared cognitive map of the landscape. Additional conclusions are the south walls of the Pueblo are purposely oriented to Hesperus Mountain and Bears Ears sacred mountains to descendant communities. The sun rises over Hesperus Mountain at or near the time of the middle sun, representing a time to change seasonal social responsibilities. And while it is currently very speculative, there does appear to be an association of the rising of the belt stars of the constellation we know as Orion with Hesperus Mountain. We are working to determine the cultural context, but it may be in relation to Tewa stories of Longsash, the constellation we know as Orion, as a leader of their migrations. The figure of Longsash Orion also evokes that of the Pueblo dancers with shirts and woven sashes on their right sides. So through this evaluation of the horizon, we've been able to establish some connections that may bring Mount Hesperus, a sacred mountain, into the origin stories of it being sacred and to many of the stories of the modern Tewa Pueblos. The other thing that we're trying to do in our cultural landscape survey program is trying to determine ways to visualize the cultural landscape. We do this through photogrammetry, dynamic panoramas, infographics, and use of Google Earth. One of the first sites we did was Escalante Pueblo. And Escalante Pueblo is a site that we did the photogrammetry with drones. And we're able to construct this model that we see of it today. This model gives you a good way to interact, to visualize the site itself, and to understand its features, its layout, and its construction in the landscape. We export these models as KMZ files, and we can actually place them into Google Earth so that we can enhance the data that's in Google Earth and also be able to take more accurate measurements. The other site that we worked at was Wallace Great House Pueblo. This site is privately owned by Bruce and Cindy Bradley, very prominent archaeologists in the Southwest here. And we were able to go out and do some photogrammetry of the site and record features at the site. Being privately owned, this site is being thoroughly excavated all the way down. And so it is important to preserve the site and to understand its context in the Southwest, in the area. It shares primary occupational periods with Escalante Pueblo and some architectural features also. One of the most important features that we wanted to record for the site was this staircase. Again, a long room that was subdivided by a wall that has an actual masonry staircase in it. This is full masonry staircase. They're not well known. They're not known in many sites. I understand there's one at Pueblo del Arroyo and at Escalante Wash, or at Bisani in Escalante Wash down by Chaco Canyon. These are formal staircases. The reason we wanted to record this in detail with photogrammetry was that this feature has now been backfilled to protect it and will probably never be seen again. So this model that we have, we can take measurements, we can do profiles, we can do all the work that we need to without the site being exposed. Another site that we took a look at, a significant look at, was the Kiva in the Wallace site. And this Kiva has been excavated down. This is the floor you're seeing in the Kiva right now is the second floor. There was a floor higher up that was a Mesa Verde reoccupation floor that had an L-shaped wing wall that is very similar to one that was found in the Kiva at Escalante Pueblo. So shared architectural features. If you look at in the bottom of the floor vault at the top, that has masonry architecture in the bottom of it, indicating that there's likely another Kiva under this one. And so we wanted to get out and record this Kiva because at its different floor levels, because this fall, Bruce and his crew is going to go down further on this floor to find what is underneath it. And so the features that you're seeing now will not be present anymore. So it's important to do this kind of work, not only to study the site and its relationship to the landscape, but to preserve the data that is being found as you go. Another cute little site, and to show that this is, it can be done with, photogrammetry can be done with almost any site, is the Wolfman panel in Bears Ears National Monument. And this is a site also that has a lot, I did this with a phone, with a smartphone. I took the photographs and loaded them into Agasoft, and we're able to get a very clear view of the rock art or the rock imagery. And this is something that can be done with any site you go to. If you take a number of photos with your camera, there are photogrammetry software programs available, apps available for your phone. Doing it with Agrosoft gives us much more versatility in how things are done. But you can see it's a good way to record rock imagery sites also. And a lot of the cultural astronomy sites we are told about are about rock imagery sites, light and shadow interactions. So this is a good way to record those sites too. And we can actually take these, load them into reference them, load them into like Stellarium, and actually show the sun projections on the walls in a virtual format. But that's going to take a little more work. Another way we are visualizing the cultural landscape is to use what we call dynamic profiles. And I wanted to stop this one here a little bit here and take a look. This is the kiva at Wallace Pueblo. And it is the kiva floor before the model I just showed you. Here we have the L-shaped wing wall, which is relates to the kiva at Escalante, and the floor features that from the Mesa Verde reoccupation. But what we can do with these dynamic panoramas is we're able to relate to the landscape. Oops. We can actually go in and then turn up and begin to interact with the landscape itself. Begin to see how the site relates to the landscape, the horizon. We go up to the horizon, to the edges. We can, in this one, we can see the peak of Ute Mountain and the Mesa Verde escarpment. So we can begin to visualize how the site relates to the horizon itself in a virtual format, in an accurate virtual format. One of the other things that we are trying to work with is the development. Rick Owling and the Society are working at developing an infographic, a way of displaying site orientation relationships to resources of nearby sites, and alignments to key horizon features such as mountain peaks and solar or lunar cycles into a single graphical display. Infographics are a brainchild of Edward Tufte, and there's some information about him and where to go to learn more about the origins of infographics. But what we're trying to do here is trying to bring together all of the data in a one graphical element to show all of the features and how a site relates to the horizon and the sky. We use GIS applications to capture the view shed, and we can display intervening hills, topography, sites on color-coded as concentric rings surrounding the site, 360 degrees surrounding the archaeological site. And these kinds of data would be put on the inner rings. The outer rings would show the horizon features, the positions of the rising and the setting sun and moon, and important stars or constellations can be plotted into this graphic also. It also incorporates the transit data that we recorded at the site. When you add the site, the archaeological site map itself, and then the horizon, the horizon panorama that we made with Hugin, you'll be able to complete the graphic, to be able to see all the points on the horizon, the different directions. And so we can see from this one that the summer solstice sunrise line extends out, can be seen, and this is in the vicinity of the La Plata Mountains to the north of Hesperus. So there's a connection at Wallace from the site itself up over the La Platas to the summer solstice sunrise. Again, the La Platas figure prominently in this site in terms of its viewshed, Wallace, at Escalante, at Lowry, at all of the sites we've studied so far, Lowry Pueblo, all the sites we've studied so far, the La Plata mountain range, including Mount Hesperus, figure prominently in their viewshed. And an infographic has a way of displaying all of that. We plan on adding annotations to these infographics and providing you with additional detail and identifying horizon features and periods of construction. Another site that we can, or another way of visualizing this data is to look at Google Earth Pro. And we've loaded a lot of our sites and our work into Google Earth Pro. And so the Google Earth Pro can bring us into seeing what these sites look like and how they relate to other sites in the vicinity, near and far, and also how they relate to each other and the landscape itself. So Google Earth Pro is actually a receptacle where we can put a lot of our data also and begin to look at sites in a context where we are looking at multiple sites, data sets from multiple sites. So we can find the common points of data. Are they looking at all incorporating one area like the La Plata Mountains? Are they all relating to each other in another way? And this is the final run up to Bears Ears. An important part of our program is to define what is the purpose in doing this type of research. What is common, and this is adapted from a Zoom lecture given by Dr. Scott Ortman, one of my mentors and teachers. And he says, and I agree, we agree that reconstructing the past through archaeology is it's just not a sufficient reason to do archaeology itself. Yes, a certain amount of archaeology must be done for cultural resource management in terms of the development of infrastructure. But to go out and just dig up sites, to dig them up is not a sufficient reason. We have to make why we're doing this apply to not only the past, but to today. Most specifically, the research that we do must benefit the tribes we study, the descendant communities. If we are not helping them, then why are we doing it? We can harness the wisdom of the ancestors by studying these sites in this way to encourage the world we want to live in today. We're also looking at archaeology can assist in transferring knowledge and to tell inspiring stories. We can take the knowledge that is given to us during archaeological projects like we do and have that transferred to the people of today. How do they relate today? Is it the same? Is it different? And we are looking at understanding the cultural landscape of the past. Helps us to find our own place in the land and to live with each other in an ever-changing climate. These are reasons that we are doing this program. And so in conclusion for the program itself, what we're looking at is a cultural landscape in the greater American Southwest, a place that we are one place, one people, inseparable from each other. I'd like to give special thanks to Al Dart and Lizzie Moon for inviting me to come today and give you this presentation. I would like to also thank the Canyon Ancients National Monument and Southwest Colorado Canyon Lions staff for helping us get this program starting to be our field laboratory now and in the future. And their great work is, their help is greatly acknowledged. We'd like to acknowledge Bruce and Cindy Bradley, the owners of the Wallace Great House Pueblo, for their support. And we hope that we can certainly help them in their investigations. And our field crew, myself, Rick Alling, Chris Dombrowski, he's our photogrammetry and licensed drone pilot. Ray Williamson, he flies drones, does photography and instrumentation work. Daoud Valent and Chloe Valentine work at photo and video documentation of the sites. Mary Wiaki is a part of, Lawrence Katernak and Bertram Savadawa are part of our Native American Advisory Council and work in the field with us. And Philip Tulostoa is part of our Native American Advisory Council. These are the people that help us. The Society for Cultural Astronomy and the Americans. These are some references that I had in the presentation. You'll be able to visit these a little later on our, when you see the recording of the program. Two more of our references during the program. One from our 2016 conference out at Crow Canyon. And I'd like to put a plug in for the society at this time. We are a Colorado nonprofit organization. We have our federal nonprofit status. We would encourage you to become a member. We have associate, student, and sustaining memberships. Benefits include a quarterly newsletter, access to journal club papers, discounts to conferences and workshops, and participation in our field work. The Society does offer complimentary one-year memberships to our Native American, Indigenous, or enrolled student participants. And memberships are funded by donors to our Carol Amberster Memorial Fund. If you wish to help us out financially, we are right now a volunteer organization. We're just beginning to try and figure out how to get grants. But right now we've had more work than we can possibly do. And we need to develop funding for the society to be able to continue doing this kind of work. So if you have the inclination to become a member or to donate to the society, there you have the two places you can go. And we also need help with grant applications and fundraising. And in final conclusion, the society would like to thank donors to the Carol Amberster Memorial Fund and in memory of Bernard Bell for their support of our Cultural Landscape Survey program and the society in general. You can contact me. My information is there. And for memberships, gas.org/join, or for donations, gas.org/donate. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lizzie and Al to conclude the program. And then a few questions later on, I'm sure.
You to unmute, Lizzie.
Lizzie,
yep. I got it. Yep. Thank you so much for that, Greg. There are some questions, but before we hit you with those or go into that, then I'm going to ask Al to give some information about Old Pueblo's mission and activities, and then we'll go into the questions and comments we have. So go ahead, Al.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me go full screen here. Our contact information, I will put this into the chat here in a few minutes, along with some other things. Old Pueblo Archaeology Center's mission here is basically to educate people about archaeology and other cultures and to foster preservation of archaeological and historical sites, to develop a lifelong concern for the importance of non-renewable resources in traditional cultures. So I'd like to just show you a few ways that we implement that mission. These are among several others that I won't be showing you. We offer educational tours to sites in the Southwest of archaeological, historical, and cultural interest. A couple of the ones we have coming up for this summer and early fall there's one at the Tucson Museum of Art, the Popol Vuh and the Hero Twins in Mesoamerica in the U.S. Southwest on August 31st. On September 22nd, I'll be leading a tour to Los Morteros, which is a Hohokam village site, and the Picture Rocks petroglyphs. And this is on the autumn equinox, where there is a calendar petroglyph there that if the sun cooperates, you'll be able to see a sun dagger form on this particular petroglyph. A couple of other tours we have coming up this fall are already filled, but we do have waiting lists for these. So if you'd like to get on the waiting list for them, please send us an email or give us a call. And we have a couple more after this in January and February. In January, we're going to be offering a tour into the Upper San Pedro Valley region in southeastern Arizona. Dr. Vance Holliday will be leading us to the Murray Springs Clovis site, and Merle Kirkpatrick will be leading us to two of the historical sites and a petroglyph site in the San Pedro Valley. And then on February 8th, Felipe Molina, who is a Yaqui Indian historian, will be leading a tour to several Yoemi or Yaqui Indian communities in the Tucson and Marana area of Arizona. So to register for any of these or for more information, just send us an email, please. We also offer periodically classes and workshops. We're going more and more online, but the next one we have coming up is a flint knapping workshop, arrowhead making and flint knapping on August 10th. This will be at Old Pueblo Archaeology Center in Tucson. I'll be offering an online course on Hohokam archaeology starting in September. This will be on Wednesday evenings, 2 hours per evening through early December. We do have an online presence besides our online classes and these webinars that we're doing. And one of those is to provide a service to people who are interested in activities in the Southwest of different organizations. We send out an email blast twice a month listing any activities we can get reference to on archaeology, histories, and cultures that are going on in the greater Southwest. And to get onto that emailing list, all you need to do is go to our homepage, oldpueblo.org, or send us an email to get onto our emailing list. Our next Third Thursday Food for Thought program, we're going to be welcoming Steve Nash, who recently took over as the new executive director of our sister organization, but unrelated, Archaeology Southwest in Tucson. He'll be giving a lecture on tree ring science and some of the difficulties involved in that. Tonight, of course, you had this evening's program with Greg Munson, which I really enjoyed. And one of our most important programs is teaching children about archaeology and the scientific method. We have a simulated archaeological dig site set up on our facility in Tucson, where we bring whole classrooms of kids into the facility to conduct an excavation under supervision and to apply archaeological principles and learn about the scientific method for interpretation. So to support these programs, especially our kids programs, we do ask for donations. Greg has asked for donations for his organization. I encourage you to do that too. You can go to our homepage, oldpueblo.org, and there is a place down there where you can click to donate by PayPal, or you can mail us a check, or you can call us to give us credit card authorization for a donation or a membership. So I will put these links into the chat here shortly. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Al. I can attest to those classes and other things that I'm involved in, so I appreciate you doing that. So there have been lots of comments, lots of compliments about the program and the presentation, how much they enjoyed that. But for time's sake, I will start with the questions so we can cover as many of those first. And the first question that came in is, do we need permission, cultural and legal, to conduct surveys? And if so, how is that permission obtained?
Most of the lands that we work on are federal government, BLM, or National Park Service. And for that, you do have to generally go through a permitting process. And with most of the parks, they also have consultation groups also that guide the kind of research that they want done. I would say we do need to have permission to work in a site if it's government owned, if we're going into non-public areas. And we did that with Canyon the Ancients. We had a permit from the monument manager, Ray O'Neill, to not only do the project we were outlining, but also to fly drones at the site. So one of the things that is coming up relates to some of the other questions here is that we work with a lot of individual Native American indigenous peoples, and certainly permission to speak of anything that they are relating to us is necessary. To record that, to disseminate that information. Well, one of the things that's really coming up is that the tribal historic preservation offices are beginning to take a more active role in the narrative of archaeological research as opposed to individuals. And so this is something we're going to have to be working with a lot more, is to begin to work with the tribal historic preservation offices. But a lot of that is showing that the work we're doing is of high quality, is well-founded, well-based, well-designed, and including tribal consultation as a major component. So on the federal lands, we do need permissions, legal, yes, and cultural. We're trying to find a way to work our way through those, not barriers, but those issues, those subjects. And I can see the questions on my screen. So the next one is, how do you resolve the difference between tribes about the significance of the site? That is done through the consultation process, the Native American Advisory Council, the Cultural Landscapes Advisory Group. It's about bringing people together into a safe space to discuss these ideas openly, but to also determine what is appropriate to share. And yes, always when you're dealing with individuals or different tribes, they're going to disagree about what's important and what's not. You give them their voice, you let them have their say, you incorporate them into the process. In our organization, we're trying to get more indigenous voices on our board of directors. Jason Cordova, I assume that's our Jason Cordova at the top there. He's on our board of directors. But we need others. We need to have those voices in our group. And we will never probably get everybody to agree on one particular thing, but we can at least give voice to the individual points of view.
Now, Greg, if I could add something to that, in my experience as a professional archaeologist working for a number of different organizations, including federal and state governments, in Arizona, at least, the tribes have generally worked out among themselves who will act as a lead consulting tribe for areas in which multiple tribes have claims. And they've done that very cooperatively. Generally, they will designate a specific tribe to represent all of them in Arizona, at least. And I think that's also the case in New Mexico. Not so sure about Colorado. In terms of how you resolve tribal differences with what archaeologists may think is important, there's another factor in there besides tribes and archaeologists, and that is the federal government perspective. You know, archaeologists often work for and with federal government agencies, but it's the agency's decision on what the final decision is for addressing tribal concerns. So sometimes archaeologists do get overruled, in my experience.
Okay, and I think the next question was from Claudia Newbold. I'm doing it for the tribes, music to my ears. can you discuss how your data has been received and used by tribes? That's another thing we're working on, is to, probably one of the most important things is to take these presentations and go and do them for the tribes. Do them for the Tribal Historic Preservation Office board. You may get a little bit of head nodding, you might not get any comments, but at least they're seeing that we are doing this kind of work in a respectful way, and that may open up avenues of communication. So we have to work more on working with the tribes in terms of how we disseminate information. One of the things I would encourage everybody in the audience to do is to go to our, we have a YouTube channel. I might put that in the chat. Let's see, I gotta bring it up again. SCAS, SCAAS .connects #2 U. Look for it on YouTube. We have a large YouTube channel in which we are, let's see, have featured a lot of Native American videos from our 2019 conference at Northern Arizona University, the Native American Cultural Center there. We held a conference there in 2019, pre-COVID, and in that one was about traditional knowledge, the development of sciences and traditional knowledge. And in that place, we had an open forum, a safe place where we got together with the 8 tribes, showed up to give presentations. And with their permission, we posted a lot of their presentations on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to put that in the chat. See if I could figure out how to send that.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Good job.
And then the last question, I think, was from Brad Schaefer, a person who I probably haven't seen or heard from in many, many years. I'm glad you were able to join us, Brad, if you're still there. He says, I'm thankful and appreciate that our program has avoided all of the issues that archaeoastronomy has experienced in the past and are very prevalent on the internet. And by sticking, like he says, by sticking to solar alignments, maybe lunar alignments, that's also a very difficult issue. And culturally relevant information. There's all kinds of things that are put out on the internet about this aligns to that everywhere. And what we have to look at when we look at cultural astronomy is 2 components. Archaeoastronomy, which is the archaeology of the astronomy, how it was done, the architecture, the building, the, like I said, the archaeology behind it. The second component of cultural astronomy is the ethnoastronomy, the why. Why were these things important? Why? So it's the how and the why, the cultural relevance. Those 2 components, in our mind, come together and form the discipline of cultural astronomy, which is nothing more than a subdiscipline of anthropology. It is nothing separate, it's nothing different, nothing weird. It is just anthropology. In the past, there have been some issues with documentation, methodologies, and conclusions. And I see a lot of the stuff you see on the History Channel, and oh, I won't even go down that road. So it is a matter of gaining trust with the tribes and doing this kind of work correctly.
Wow, you have given me so many more hours on YouTube and going down all of the avenues of research that you've done. That was wonderful. I have one more question here in the chat way back. It says, would Escalante Pueblo be connected to the Anasazi? The dates kind of line up.
Okay. Anasazi is a term that was coined probably back almost 100 years ago. And it is no longer a term that is used to describe the peoples of the Southwest from that time period. Through consultation with the tribes, the term that we use now is ancestral Puebloan. These are the ancestral peoples of the Puebloan people of today. Anasazi is one of those terms that has a lot of controversy around it, exactly what it means. Some says enemy ancestors, indicating that there was contact. It's a Navajo word, Dene word, and it is a word that in some ways have been associated with conflict and those kinds of things. I actually have a different take on how the word came to be. One of my heroes, Jesse Walter Fuchs, the last page of his 1910 notebook, when he was in the Navajo, what is now Navajo National Monument area, talked about how the cliff dwellings were called Hogan Natsaze. The Hogan house, Natsaze, the old ones. And that's what it said in his notebook. And actually, Hogan Natsaze means homes of the little people living in the cliffs, basically. So Hogan Natsaze, you can see, could be easily contracted down to An Natsaze. So the word, we don't know what Anasazi really means. It's, again, a matter of individual interpretation. But it is really no longer a word that is used in archaeological anthropological contexts. It's now ancestral Pueblo. If you talk to Hopi, Satsunum, Sinom, there's different terms for the old ones. I just like the word, the old ones, you know, and kind of get away from all that politics. So,
Yeah,
that's my answer to the Anasazi word question.
Okay.
that's wonderful.
And how does Escalante Pueblo relate to that, Greg?
Oh, Escalante Pueblo is ancestral Pueblo. Technically, it'd be Anasazi, yeah. From the if we were going to use the old term, yeah, it's Escalante Pueblo. All dates from the ancestral Pueblo periods. Pueblo 1, Pueblo 2, Pueblo 3, even in the basket maker times.
So I have a question. I have many questions. So we'll have to have another hour one time. But or I'll join your organization for sure.
Yes, please do.
There's so much to learn there. But I just got back from a trip from Scotland in the stone circles there. And part of the school I'm in, of course, we are studying the sacred sites and why people put stone circles in certain places and all of that. And we understand that in certain different parts of the world, they would have experienced the land and the sun and the moon in different ways. And we were actually there to celebrate the major lunar standstill, right? So we're learning about how that happens. But I see that your work, I mean, I love the work you're doing is, to me, putting together or answering so many questions I have, you know, about these bigger pictures of the land. But I see your work is mostly like in the ancestral Pueblo area, right? Or
yeah,
so far.
Yeah, we are trying to work, ancestral Pueblo with the greater American Southwest,
Right.
which
So
extends in the Four Corners regions all the way down into northern Mexico.
Wonderful. And I appreciate the links you gave, because I'm going to start looking at my landscape too. But so what are you finding is there like a prevalence of the alignments that you find here as opposed to like what they would have been aligning to in Scotland and Finland and other places? Like what did they find important more here in this area generally?
Generally in the Great American Southwest, what we're looking at primarily, like Brad Shaver said, is solar cycles, solstices and equinoxes. Primarily just the solstices, because those are the times that have the most cultural relevance to agrarian peoples. The time of equinox, which everybody is, time of the middle sun, a lot of people have associated, especially with agricultural societies such as the ancestral Puebloan, as being a time for planting. And I can tell you for a fact, if you start planting your crops in southwest Colorado in late March, you're not going to have any food. So equinox is probably not associated with planting calendars. It's probably more associated with ceremonial calendars or social political calendars. Again, that time of the power transition, because as societies developed, you have a situation where you have more and more people using props. You end up with a lot of people on the landscape, and you have to have a way for them to work together. And by separating into seasonal social organizations, summer and winter people, turquoise and squash, sometimes it's called, you end up with a social political system that is, each group is dependent upon each other to complete the year. Therefore, you need each other. Now, when it comes to, and that's the solar cycles, and I see the moon has just come out in front of me. Lunar cycles, the study of lunar cycles, the major lunar standstill, which is occurring right now, is a much tougher situation. Locally, there is Chimney Rock National Monument, and the spires of Chimney Rock, and the lunar standstill moon coming up between the two spires there. There is the, I have done some work at Sun Temple up at Mesa Verde National Park, which showed that there was an interaction between spots in Cliff Palace and Sun Temple for that the lunar standstill, southern lunar maximum moon was observed coming down through the center of Sun Temple from marked places in Cliff Palace. But the question of that is why? How was the southern lunar maximum or the lunar maximum culturally relevant? And that is a very difficult question. There is no ethnography that shows that the lunar standstill cycle was ever observed or culturally relevant in any peoples in the Southwest. And so that is part of the archaeologist anthropology that we're up against, is that there is no ethnography that says this was important. There's the issue of the number of sites that have been documented to have observed this. Because that has been thought to be culturally relevant, a lot of the sites haven't been looked at in this way. And that's what we're doing with our Cultural Landscape Survey program, is going out, measuring the horizon, finding out where these points are in the horizon, seeing if there's any architecture intentionally aligned to those things. And if there was, there had to be a cultural reason behind it. How are we going to find out what that cultural reason is through consultation with descending communities. Now, there are questions as to, is this traditional sacred knowledge that is not to be discussed outside of the tribes themselves? That's why it's not in the ethnography. That is one reason. Or perhaps the lunar standstill cycle was something that was used as part of a social political system 1,000 years ago, but if it didn't function, didn't fulfill its purpose, ended up being no longer culturally relevant, that information would have been left behind at the time of the migrations and may not have been encoded into. Or it is simply sacred knowledge that in time, with the building of trust, may, at their discretion, be given to us.
We will wait and see. So I will throw this in. It made me an email later, but I did hear about a site, and I'm not sure if it was I don't think it was in Al's class. Maybe it was somewhere else. That maybe it was Chimney Rock, where they found that kivas had been built every 19 years.
No, that's the Chimney Rock.
Okay.
It's very complicated, the tree ring dating at Chimney Rock in that one kiva, because the architecture, if you look at the architecture, the two sets of samples at Chimney Rock that allegedly show a 18, 19-year separation aren't in multiple kivas, they're in one kiva. It's in a ventilator shaft in the one kiva, 2 levels of the ventilator shaft. And this is a ventilator shaft that had no connection to the rest of the kiva. There's a lot of architectural, they're not necessarily cutting dates either. And they have to be cutting dates. So when you look at that, there's general broad things that are said, but when you start looking at the details, you have to begin to wonder. I do believe, yes, they did. I found some indications of construction periods of 18 or 19-year cycles that were at the time of lunar standstills. But again, what is the cultural reason for that? We don't know.
Yeah.
And major sites like Chimney Rock and what I found at Mesa Verde, it's possibly related to, in my mind, it's possibly related to the construction of architecture for the holding of group social gatherings. That's about a generation time cycle. So there may have been gatherings at the time of the lunar standstills to reaffirm cultural identity, to mix up the gene pool a little bit. And so this may be a reason for that. But at the time when that was left behind, the migration. So it's very difficult to talk about, to learn these things when we don't have modern context. One of the groups I'm participating in right now is the Chimney Rock Lunar Legacy Council, in which we are actively working on a way for people to see what's going on at Chimney Rock in a virtual fashion. Only really tribes are being allowed, or research groups with tribal consultation components are being allowed to go see the event in person up on the spires. It's very dangerous up there at Chimney Rock at night. I've hiked up there in the dead of night to see this many times. And since removing the fire tower up at Chimney Rock, it's a very limited area and not real safe in the dark. And it's also, a personal sacred event too. So we are working at trying to find ways to disseminate this information more and more and more.
Well, I love your work. I love the inquiries and the research that you're making. And yeah, I look forward to know more. So I think we have come to the end of the time. You're also seeing some of the comments and how much people have appreciated this presentation and really enjoyed it, and how fascinating it's been. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of people learning more about your organization and joining. So Al, is there anything else to add for you?
Yeah, there's a couple more things in the chat here. Sharona Frederick says, this is a superb slide on what is the purpose in doing this type of research. I particularly like the last 2 reasons. They're convincing to students who may not see the relevance of history, let alone archaeology. There was one comment about one of the programs you were talking about and how well it doesn't work. Don't think there's any others here.
There was one more comment early on too, but it was just a comment. So I wanted to get to the questions first, but Marilyn commented about, looks like US Congress may cut money from the BLM program, which I think would be a mistake, would need these lands taken care of properly. And she put a link to the Conservation Land Foundation.
Very good. Thank you.
I put a note in the chat about the links you can contact Old Pueblo Archaeology Center through. So that's all I have.
Okay, well, wonderful. On behalf of Old Pueblo Archaeology Center, I'd like to thank our guest speaker tonight. Thank you, Greg, for sharing with us this evening. And we also thank all of you in our audience for joining us tonight. Please consider making a donation to support Old Pueblo's efforts to educate children and adults about archaeology, history, and cultures, including through programs like this one. So thank you all and good night.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Al.